At last weekend's Singapore Grand Prix, a last lap fastest lap for Daniel Riccardo generated a huge amount of attention. Up until that point, Max Verstappen's title rival Lando Norris had held the fastest lap. With how close the Drivers' Championship is at the moment, that 1 point taken away from Norris could prove absolutely vital come the end of the season. Considering the relationship between Red Bull and VCARB, Zak Brown was furious after the Grand Prix, but Toto Wolff has leapt to Red Bull's defense. Today, I'll check out Zak's complaints about Red Bull and why Toto Wolff has shockingly come to their defense, so don't go anywhere. The Singapore Grand Prix was almost the perfect race for Lando Norris. He qualified in pole position and then managed to buck the worrying trend of losing positions on lap 1. Leading the Grand Prix after the first lap, he proceeded to open up a massive gap, and the only threat to him winning was a few close calls with the barriers as he tried to open a big enough gap to pit, come out in first still, and then secure the fastest lap. He already had the fastest lap at that point, and there was no reason to think that anyone would go for it. But then, Daniel Riccardo, running in last position, pitted for fresh soft tyres and proceeded to set the fastest lap and the track record. The fastest lap is worth 1 point in the Drivers' Championship if you finish in the top 10, otherwise it's worthless. So seeing Daniel Riccardo go for it so late in the race was a surprise to everyone. The move by VCARB and Riccardo has reignited the discussions of Red Bull's A and B team and how it gives them a competitive advantage which no other team can replicate. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella said after the Singapore Grand Prix, the relationship needs to be addressed. Norris reduced Red Bull driver Max Verstappen's lead at the top of the Drivers' Championship to 52 points by winning in Singapore, but it should probably have been a point smaller. Stella said he didn't have the elements to prove Riccardo's effort was motivated by a desire to aid Verstappen's title bid, but said the relationship between Red Bull and VCARB was a longer-term issue. Stella said, "I don't know the facts, I just saw that Racing Bulls went for the fastest lap and they achieved it. But for me, talk about sportsmanship and so on, I think it would be out of place. I think we have to take it at face value that they scored the fastest lap. And potentially, as part of a longer-term conversation, we need to put the sport in a position in which, at any stage, being it trackside or being it factory side, teams behave in a totally autonomous manner. Because this is a Constructors' Championship, a Drivers' Championship. It's not a coalition championship. Therefore, this needs to be definitely addressed." While Andrea was clear that he didn't have the proof to say that VCARB had sent Riccardo for the fastest lap to help Max, that is what happened. Max was helped by the fastest lap. Whether it was done to help Max or not, it's clear to see why McLaren would be frustrated by what happened. If it weren't for the fact that the Singapore Grand Prix was Daniel Ricciardo's last ever F1 race, there would probably be far more outrage from McLaren. The Australian is expected to lose his seat to Liam Lawson before next month's United States Grand Prix. Ricciardo spent 2 seasons working alongside Stella as Norris's teammate at McLaren before being dropped by the team at the end of 2022, but has failed to re-establish himself since returning with RB midway through 2023. Stella added, "I did not see it coming. I was a little surprised that the highest priority of Racing Bulls racing in Singapore was to go and score the fastest lap of the race. At the same time, I have so much sympathy, support and friendship with Daniel that I'm just happy that he may add this fastest lap to his track record." Before I go on to Riccardo's surprising comments on the matter, make sure to check out f1reverse.com, our merch store. We spent a lot of time coming up with designs that we thought looked clean, cool and showed off our passion for Formula 1. The quality of this gear is so good as well. We're shipping worldwide, so wherever you are, it's the perfect way to help support us in bringing you daily F1 news. Ricciardo did fan the flames of the controversy somewhat by saying that he hopes Max wins the Drivers' Championship by 1 point now. I don't mean this against Lando, but part of me is hoping Max wins by 1 point because I think I guaranteed myself a nice Christmas present if so. I think, obviously, it's with a little bit of Red Bull in mind, but maybe just to have one last crack at doing a fast one, if it is to be it. VCARB team principal Lauren Mekies has opened up on the thinking behind the fastest lap call and explained how it actually all revolved around the circumstances of Ricciardo's race weekend. Mekies denied that there had been any conversation with Red Bull over the fastest lap tactic. This claim seems to be backed up by the radio conversations on the Red Bull pit wall, debating about whether to pit Sergio Perez from 10th place to steal the fastest lap, before it was agreed to abort the move because Riccardo had stopped in the meantime. Mekis was also clear that the idea had not even come up in its own strategy conversations before the race. Of course not, he explained. You always hope that you will have a well-timed safety car and you'll be back in contention, otherwise you don't go racing. So that's why we started on the soft actually. This was not something that you plan at the beginning of the race. It's just after how tough a race it was and how meaningless it had become for him to fight at the back like that. We just felt it was the right thing. While Red Bull and VCARB have both rubbished the idea that they work together to take the fastest lap, the conspiracy theories won't be stopped that easily. If Verstappen were to win the championship by 1 point, this would likely be pointed to as the pivotal moment. The relationship between the two Red Bull-owned teams was questioned earlier this year as well, when it was announced that the technical relationship between both teams would be much closer. While there are supplier and customer team relationships between a number of teams in the sport, Red Bull said that the B team would start taking as many parts as possible in an attempt to make them more competitive. It was an announcement which McLaren took great issue with at the time. Surprisingly, Toto Wolff has jumped to the defense of Red Bull. The Mercedes team principal said that Daniel Riccardo taking the fastest lap point away from Lando Norris at the Singapore Grand Prix was not a dirty play, though he did seem to think that the Red Bull team had made the decision to go for the fastest lap with Riccardo because it would take a point away from Lando. I think you're going to probably play all the strategies that you have, Wolff said. I don't think it was a dirty play, not at all. It could come down to a point. It was within the regulations. The drivers weren't unfair with each other. I think it's just an extra point, no big deal. While Wolff is correct that the move was within the regulations, many have said since the Grand Prix that the rules need changing. While it is unlikely that anything can be done about the relationship between the two Red Bull teams, short of forcing the sale of VCARB, the fastest lap rules could be changed. Reintroduced in 2019, having originally existed for the first decade of the World Championship from 1950 to 59, the rationale for the rule was to create another talking point and encourage drivers to take risks, particularly late in races. The flaws in the rule were immediately apparent. Those who wrote it acknowledged as much when they added the proviso that you could only get the point if you finished in the top 10. That was to stop groups of stragglers turning the latter stages of Grand Prix into their own mini-qualifying session in pursuit of a point because they had no chance of scoring one for a top 10 finish. What happened in Singapore highlighted the inherent problem with the rule. Both World Championships could be influenced by the actions of a driver who finished a Grand Prix in 18th place. Yes, every championship is influenced at every race by other teams and drivers, but 99% of the time that influence happens because of those teams and drivers protecting their own interests. Teams driving their own races and striving for maximum point finishes rightly influence the championships. But in the case of Riccardo's fastest lap in Singapore, there were no points on offer for him. The only thing it achieved was taking a point off a championship challenger. It's unlikely to actually impact the outcome of the Drivers' Championship, which has only been won by a single point or less 9 times. But the situation has still increased calls for the scrapping of the rule altogether and the examination of Red Bull having 2 teams. Well, what do you think of Riccardo's last lap fastest lap? Was there some collusion between the 2 Red Bull teams? And do you think the fastest lap should just be scrapped altogether? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.